Okay, welcome back to the stream, guys. Of course, as you guys can see from the title, today we have something different today. So today we are just doing a very chill live. We're of course doing a Q&A, a fashion Q&A, where you can ask me any fashion question. And essentially, if I can answer it, I shall be answering it. So today should be a lot of fun in that respect. Someone saying the intro still hits. It certainly does. You've got people. I'm going to go through the questions on Instagram first because I asked people to send in questions on my Instagram story. So that should be a lot of fun. And then after that, we can get into some of the questions that you guys have on YouTube, but also if you guys have questions on Twitter as well. So yeah, it's really up to you. Satan's asked me how the bracelet's treating me. Um, They hurt a lot. They're really painful, to be very honest with you, but I'm managing one way or another. I'm surviving, I guess. So let's just go through these questions on Instagram, get straight into it, not waste any time. So the first question is by IR 2.0, which is very interesting. Some of these questions I might have to type them out, but the question essentially is, why the hell are fashion schools, sorry, allowing students to send their work out to be made? Which that's a good question to start with, because something that's really funny is when I first got into fashion, of course you guys know the story on all these things, like how I got into fashion, my first internship, the fact of how long I've worked in the industry, all that sort of stuff, right? And for me, I think the craziest thing is because I worked in the industry, I just assumed that everyone kind of just learns how to design, or everyone knows how to, I guess, make patterns or things like that. But when I went to fashion school, I realized that at CSM, for example, people have, if you don't know, they're technicians. So technicians help a lot of the design students sometimes even make things like sew things together. There are really rich fashion design students who actually just go to external tailors to get their whole stuff made. They just tell the tailor what their idea is, and the tailor essentially does all of the work. The fact that that's allowed to me is quite crazy. I also think that the way fashion school is marked, how people's work is marked, is really crazy, because if you're someone who knows how to sew but maybe not well, but you're learning, and you kind of sew not too well, versus someone who just has money and gives all that money to a tailor to get it done, if without any context you can look at both of their work and be like, that person's work is a lot better, the way that it's finished is a lot more professional. But then it's not really a fair judgment on who is a more skilled designer or whose work is necessarily better. That's not really a fair judgment. So I think because of factors like that, the way that people's work is graded, I think, needs to be revised, especially at fashion school. I think, from my understanding, at least when I was at CSM, a lot of people's work suffered because they were doing a lot of the stuff themselves, and they're competing against rich kids that can afford to just pay for everything. So it's not really fair, to be honest. I don't It's weird how much schools allow students to just not do their own stuff and outsource a lot of their designs. That is crazy. Even though, yes, if you have a brand, if you have, a business, then that's kind of how the business will function. But my understanding is you're supposed to be in fashion design school to learn how to actually design. What's the point of going to fashion design school just to not like learn anything, not to try and learn any skills, not to work closely with the technicians, but not get them to do all your work? Or why would you be there not to even like challenge yourself? To me, that's really strange, to be honest. That's very strange. But yeah, really good question. Um, I don't know if that's ever going to change, to be honest, because fashion school is very much a place for rich kids for the most part, anyway. Like the kind of people that study fashion design, you're either a kid with a dream like me, or you're just really rich and it's like a hobby that you want to turn into a job, but you don't really need the job because your parents give you an allowance of 5K every month anyway. So it's not like you need it. It's just like, I kind of like clothes. What's a job? It's kind of funny. Bob says, I low key think I should answer the questions on YouTube first. This is YouTube elitism. What's going on here? Let me see some of the questions on YouTube and see what you guys are saying. Let's see what you guys are saying. Hi, I'm interested in working in fashion, not necessarily to be in the retail world. Now I'm a flight attendant and I'm planning to pursue my master's in fashion. What would you recommend the kind? So the thing about fashion is a very vast industry. So when you say work in fashion, that can mean anything. It can mean anything from working as a designer or working as a journalist like I do, or even like a content creator. I'm a journalist and a content creator at the same time. Or you can be a lawyer in fashion, or you can be a buyer in fashion. You can be a product tester. You can be so many different things. So I think with fashion, you first have to decide what you like. Do you like marketing? Do you like PR, communications? Do you like writing? Do you like designing? Do you like styling? I don't know, photography. You have to decide what you like before you even think about what to pursue your master's in. Because you don't want to like specialize in something that you don't really like. And because fashion is so broad, you can actually almost do anything in the fashion industry. So don't limit your choices would be my first piece of advice. But I can't really give you more advice because I don't really know what aspect of fashion you're most interested in, to be honest. Francisco says my external tailor is my aunt. In that case, you can get away with it, I guess. Also, Satan Lucifer. This name always gets to me. It's crazy. Satan Lucifer. Um, So that's like an English major paying a contractor to write their essay for them. Do you know what's funny though? Don't a lot of people do that these days? Like I'm hearing more and more that people use Chat GPT to write their essays and stuff like that. Of course, the essays will be terrible because Chat GPT doesn't really write in a tone of voice that's very creative. It's very pragmatic with the way that it writes. So it's obvious. And I know there are tools that teachers are now using to be able to tell whether it's ChatGPT that wrote it or not. But I think more and more people don't even know how to write anything. They're just putting prompts into ChatGPT. So I think that's already started, actually. People are getting contractors and AI to write stuff for them. Can designers survive in 2024 without a social media presence? I guess it depends who you are. Um, for example, if we take the Row as an example, now the Row has a social media presence in the sense that like they have an Instagram page, they have all these things, but the Row doesn't really post a lot of their fashion on their Instagram page. They just post like artwork and furniture that they like. But the reason why the Row can get away with it is because the Olsen twins are famous as fuck. So even though they're not relying on social media, if the people that run the brand are famous as shit, therefore their friends that wear the brand are famous as shit, they can kind of bypass all of that. If you're not in that situation, which is most of us, then you kind of need a social media presence in some sense if you want to survive as a brand. I don't see how a new brand, unless you're a celebrity or you have celebrity friends that can endorse your brand without you having to build an audience through social media. I don't see how that could be viable in any way, to be honest. But it also depends how big you want to be. I know a lot of companies, like in Japan, you'd see like a lot of these places that just specialize in denim, like in some random corner in Japan. And you go there and it's the best denim you've ever seen. And these brands have no social media, but because people in that area know that that's the place to go for really good denim and really high quality denim, what tends to happen is people just end up flocking there. And essentially, those brands can make enough money where they're kind of satisfied and they don't need to end up going on social media trying to make more money. They're content. If you're trying to build, I don't know, $1 million business or $1 billion business, then you definitely need social media. If you want that kind of like, I'm trying to sell to LVMH growth, you definitely need social media. How do I get into fashion styling without going to school for it? So funny enough, I feel like most stylists don't go to school for styling, to be honest. I think styling is kind of one of those aspects of fashion where it's who you know. It's not necessarily how good you are or going to fashion school or having a degree. The degree helps because you're around designers, you're around other creatives that have a network that you can sort of tap into. And also the degree would open other separate opportunities. But if you're not going to fashion school, you just need to go to like events where a lot of fashion people are and tell people you're a stylist. I have friends who didn't study styling in school and they're really big stylists. I won't mention their names because they didn't ask to be mentioned, but they just go to fashion events, they meet people, they talk to people, they're like, oh, I'm a stylist, da, da, da. Before you know, they have that person like, oh, you're a stylist. I have this campaign. I would love to hire you for this campaign. Let me see some of your work. Oh, and then before you know it, these friends are making a really good living just styling. I think you just need to be, if you're going to be a fashion stylist, you just need to be very sociable. You need to go to a lot of events. You need to meet people. You need to build a strong network. That's the best way to get into styling. But I don't even think that's one of the industries where less so you need a fashion degree or you need to go to fashion school for. So yeah. What do you think of menswear writer Derek Guy? Shout out to Derek. I like Derek Guy. I think he's really funny. I'll put him on the screen so people can see who we're talking about. It's this guy on Twitter called Die Workwear. I don't actually know Angband, if that's how to say your name. I don't know what his background is, to be honest. I probably need to do more research on him. I just know him because of his tweets. But I think that he is obviously really knowledgeable about menswear. But I find it funny because I don't necessarily agree with everything he says. I think he has a very my opinion or no opinion way of talking about things, but I think he does that deliberately to be like funny and witty, which is why I find him really hilarious. I do like his sense of humor. He will say something like quarter zips on men look atrocious, or this kind of jacket on men looks stupid, and people people are up in arms on Twitter. I find that stuff really, really funny, how people get so riled up over those things. But I'm a big fan of his. I think he makes really quality content. On Twitter, that's as high quality content as you can get on Twitter because, of course, one of the limiting factors on Twitter is the text limit. So you can't really say a lot of things, but he is really detailed. And I actually learn a lot reading his tweets every day. So I definitely enjoy his Twitter, and I would say I'm a big fan. Definitely a big fan. Let's see. Oh, this Q&A is going a lot better than I expected, to be honest. I didn't expect there to be this many questions. There's so many questions I probably will struggle to keep up, but let me keep going. Is the industry due for a collapse due to decreasing profit margins, vanishing methods of cost cutting from manufacturers, and shrinking exploitation pools? Oh, that's a really good question. I feel like this is something that I talk about all the time, right? The fact that there's only so far that fashion can go before everything kind of collapses on itself. This is something that I talk about all the time, damn near. Recently, of course, we saw the performance from LVMH. We saw the really bad performance from Kering. A lot of brands, their Q3 reports weren't very favorable. Of course, you have brands here and there that have had a good spell, but there was this really good article I was reading via BOF. I'll put it on the screen now, that is titled LVMH Results Spell Trouble for Luxury Sector. And essentially, the question you're asking, a lot of the answers are in here in terms of the shift in luxury spending, the fact that because of what's happening in China, there's a smaller customer base for brands in the short term and whether they can change that in the long term. These kind of things. Also, it's just, I feel like for a lot of these luxury brands, they've exhausted any market possible. Not all of them, of course, because we're still seeing a brand like Louis Vuitton make more than 20 billion in annual revenue, which is insane, by the way. But I just feel like all of them are going to get to a certain point where quite literally every single person that could buy a luxury product buys a luxury product, and there's no more growth to be had. These brands have seen so much insane growth over the years, and I think it's very unrealistic to just expect that they're going to continue growing to infinity and beyond. I just don't think that's a reality. And so a lot of the growth for a lot of these brands will slow down. Of course, we've seen Burberry really struggling. We've seen Gucci really struggling. I think that will happen for the foreseeable future. I also think that this idea and these brands that have all decided now that they're all going to jack their prices by insane amounts, I don't know how I feel about that. I think eventually that's going to plateau, and I think a lot of brands are going to end up having to invest a lot more in products on the lower end of the market where people can actually afford the stuff. This is a good thing that I saw on BOF's Instagram page of how luxury brands have increased their prices dramatically since 2019. So you have the Prada Galleria bag, which has literally increased by 117% between 2019 and 2024, which to me, insane. Absolutely insane. The Chanel flat bag, the large one, has increased by 91% between 2019 and 2024. One of the reasons, and I've done a whole live stream about this, definitely check it out if you haven't seen it, because I went into great detail. In the Burberry Live, we talk about the fact that one of the big mistakes that Burberry made was thinking that they are Hermes or thinking that they are Bottega Veneta. And they kind of made that mistake because they hired Daniel Lee. So I don't know what the CEO was thinking, but maybe they were thinking, well, we're bringing the person that, brought Daniel Lee. We're bringing Daniel Lee, who was the person that brought Bottega Veneta to the masses. So in a sense, because of the success that he had at Bottega, maybe we can replicate that. But Bottega and Burberry as brands are completely different. Their customer bases are completely different. The Burberry customer is not used to spending the amount of money that the Bottega customer spends. It's just a completely different sector in fashion. And so to think that you're just going to bring one creative director and magically, by some form of magic, he's going to make Burberry the new Bottega just didn't make any sense. And so I think that this whole hiking of prices thing is going to lead to the downfall for a lot of luxury brands. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Catherine Miller says, do you think the presentation of more wearable fashion trends is the industry's response to backlash about some of the previous years' not so wearable trends? So I think it depends where you're looking. For me, I see fashion in like this very totalitarian sense. And what I mean by that is I always just see things going on simultaneously. So I do think that now there are more wearable fashion trends in the industry, whether we're talking about quiet luxury. And of course, it's a wearable trend because yes, if you can't afford Brunello or you can't afford Xenia, Jill Sander, Hermes, The Row, whatever, you can replicate those because the likes of Zara and COS are all copying those brands. So even if you can't afford Phoebe Philo, you can afford the Arquette version of it. Or if you want to spend more money, maybe like Joseph or Jigsaw. That's a wearable trend, but simultaneously you have the likes of Alessandro Michele and his crazy maximalist aesthetic at Valentino, or so many other brands. So I think everything goes on simultaneously. I just think it depends where you look. So yes, if you go to brands that are more pragmatic in terms of wearability, the likes of Prada, the likes of Jill Sander, you're going to see more wearable clothing. But I think there are other brands where the stuff is not so wearable and it's really avant-garde. Let's see. What are your thoughts on manufacturers stealing IP patterns from fashion houses and selling cheaper versions on the market? So I'm kind of in two minds about this. I think that I don't agree with counterfeiting in any sense because people work really hard to make original things. So I think when someone has worked really hard, I just think morally to copy someone's stuff and sell it for less and make so much money off someone else's idea, morally, I can't agree with. However, there's what can I say about it? The laws are the laws. It's very hard to trademark IP in fashion unless there's a very distinctive signifier to your work. So for Nike, that would be a Nike tick. For Adidas, that would be the three stripes. That's why recently, well, not so recently, but we saw that lawsuit between Tom Brown and Adidas. Or like a gross grain for Gucci, even though Gucci, I've seen a lot of brands use a similar gross grain and it doesn't really matter. So because it's so hard, morally, I don't agree with it, but what can we really do about it, if that makes any sense? There's nothing you can really do about it. Let's go. Oh my God, I can't really keep up with these questions. Let's see. How would you advise an aspiring designer to start a business in the New York City market, since it seems like the market absolutely hates new talent? Damn. Yeah, to be honest, this is one of those questions where I can't really give you advice because I don't live in New York. And I'm also not, because I'm only going to give advice where I can give like very useful advice. I'm also not involved in the New York fashion industry. Most of my experience is in Europe. So I work with brands in the UK, in Italy, and in France. So if we're talking about France, Italy, and the UK, I can give you all the tips in the world, but I don't really truly understand the American market from a very business perspective because I don't work in that market. So I wouldn't know. The UK, Italy, France, there are many initiatives for emerging talent. It seems that in Europe, there's more support for emerging talent, I guess, than in the US, it seems. So yeah, I can't really give you advice on that. Hopefully, there are people in the chat that have, some advice to do with that. Let's see. Let's start flying through. Sorry if I missed your questions, by the way. It's just there's so many questions I can't really keep up, so I might skip some. But please don't take it personally. It's not a personal thing. Let's see. Burberry and Prada, both brands have a solid heritage and unique statement pieces. Why is one struggling and the other never stops growing? Prada can change their prices whenever without consequences. Yeah, but it's because so when you think of, first of all, Prada is just way more profitable than Burberry. Prada has more product categories that work than Burberry. When we think of Burberry, what do you think about? You think about trench coats. Do you think about anything else apart from trench coats? I don't really. They have some other products that do well, especially fragrances and other things. But for the most part, I think when you think about Burberry, you think of, trench coats. When you think of Prada, you think of bowling bags, you think of all different kinds of bags, you think of nylon bags, nylon jackets, nylon accessories, you think of certain runway shows, ugly chic as an aesthetic, you think of minimalism, you think they just Prada is just more fashion forward as people view it. So there are more things that most people would buy from Prada than Burberry. So when Prada raises their prices, no one really bats an eyelid because they already had some product categories where the price didn't make sense. So it's not totally out of whack the way it would be with Burberry, which is why with Burberry, it kind of just it struck everyone like, oh my God, like Burberry just raised their prices. Whereas with Prada, when they do it, no one even really notices. It's not a big story. I remember when Daniel Lee first went to Burberry and the prices raised, everyone was making TikToks about it. I saw it all over Twitter. So I think the way they operate just completely different. And the perception of both brands, even though they're both heritage brands, I think they're completely different also. Any tips for starting a fashion YouTube channel? So I did this interview actually. I'll put it on the screen just so you guys can potentially watch it if you're interested. Let me see if I can put that on the screen quickly. Because I talk about this in this interview, which is why I'm like mentioning it now. But essentially, I was on this podcast called The Fashion Nap with someone that I'm a big fan of. And essentially, in this interview, I was asked, like, is YouTube oversaturated? Like, fashion YouTube, is it oversaturated and stuff like that? And I personally don't think so, because I think that there are so many perspectives in fashion that are still missing, especially in the YouTube space. So I think so long as you have an interesting point of view, and you don't even need like that strong of a knowledge base, you just need to be knowledgeable about the specific thing that you're talking about. So whatever you talk about, just do a lot of research. I think you'll be fine. Also, consistency is key. The time when I get the most views and I see the most growth on my channel is when I'm the most consistent. And when I'm less consistent, everything drops off. So you also have to be really consistent. I think actually consistency and quality are the two most important things over everything else. So just make sure that you provide value with every video, and then also make sure that you are consistent. Those are the two most important things, in my personal opinion. So yeah, those would be my quick tips on starting a YouTube channel, a fashion YouTube channel. And it also depends what kind of fashion YouTube channel. Is it styling? Because fashion is broad. Once again, it goes back to like the person that asked about working in fashion. Do you want to be making styling videos? Do you want to make analytical videos, kind of like my channel, or someone like, let's say, Bliss Foster, or who else does like analytical kind of content, or like newsy content like Mary's Room, or luxury content, or history content like Understitch? It just depends. I feel like there's so many, even within the niche of fashion, there are so many smaller niches that branch out from fashion YouTube as a thing. Alyssa says, can you give me advice on how to make it in the fashion industry? I am not from a major city / fashion city, so not that much opportunity. For context, I'm from Pharrell City. I love that. Somewhere in Virginia. So what I will say, first of all, is that the internet is your friend. I don't think there have ever been as many opportunities in fashion as there are now, because of how the internet has democratized fashion as an industry, right? So I don't know what you would want to do, Alyssa, in fashion, like what specific aspect of fashion. But I will say that the internet is your friend. When I started in fashion, I knew for a fact I was not going to get hired by any magazines as a journalist. So I took matters into my own hands and created my own platform. And I use the internet to do that. And this is me, who was born and raised in London. I'm from London, a major fashion city, and I still had to do that. So I think utilize online. Not everyone wants to start a platform, but you can use the internet in different ways. Even if you don't want your face to be everywhere, there are writers that have Substacks that are doing really well. There are people that, do stuff on Twitter. I think it just depends, but you have to have a strategy if you're going to do the online thing. But I think it's definitely your best friend, especially if you're not from a major fashion city where you can't just go to events and meet people who will kind of just give you jobs in the industry based on vibes, which happens a lot in London or in Italy. Like, I'll be in Italy and I'll go to an event and I'll chat to someone and tell them what I do. And then we exchange numbers. And then 2 months later, they message me for a job. It's really random. Really, really random. Someone said Kering will fall first. Damn. Damn. That's crazy. The best way to boycott fashion brands is to learn how to make your own ideas come to life at a price that's affordable to you. That's really true. Although my one caveat to that is maybe not everyone has the facilities to be able to put that time down. I only say this because, people have full-time jobs and kids to look after and other responsibilities, and they're taking care of their mum and taking care of other family members. I think if you're in that position, it's very hard to then find more time to put into, learning to sew and make your own clothes and learning to make patterns and learning about fabrics. I think some people are in a position to do that, but not everyone. But it's a good point though. In my case, what I do is I find ways to not pay full price for a lot of brands. So even though I might buy brands that people deem expensive, I'm spending 20% of the retail price for most things. Should I get a fashion history master's degree and then become the curator of fashion at the Met Museum, or should I pursue something else? Um, the Empress, I can't really answer that question for you. It depends. Is that really what you want to do? Be a fashion curator? Because if that's what you want to do, you don't necessarily need to do a fashion history degree, but any history degree would be really important to be a curator at a museum or something like that. So yeah, very important. Very important. Rachel says, as a fashion journalist, how do you keep up with the quality smaller fashion houses slash creators outside of the center of the industry who really should have support and exposure? So luckily, I'm in a position where, because I built an audience online, I get invited to stuff every day by varying sizes of brands. So like big brands, smaller creators. I talk to designers damn near every single day. And so I guess because of that, I kind of just know all the smaller brands, especially in London, especially in the UK. I am very aware of the smaller brands popping up at any point in time. I see their events. I see what they are doing. I see the noise that's happening, even with really underground brands. And then also, I'm in a lucky position where I have a very great audience also. So people bring things to my attention. People message me on Instagram. Have you seen this brand? Have you seen this? Have you seen this brand? I just learned about it. Have you seen this brand? I went to Antwerp last week and I saw this brand. It's really cool. So because of those factors, I kind of just know the brands at different levels. So yeah, that's how I stay in touch with all these things. And then of course I find out myself sometimes too. Do you think there's any actual fashion community in London outside of just having friends into clothes? I think there are fashion communities. I don't really know about now because I'm a lot older now and I don't really hang around London the way I used to. But when I was younger, it depends what you mean by community. When I was younger, I used to resell Supreme. And when I used to resell Supreme, it was a community because those same people that I met in the line reselling Supreme are the same people that I would see at an event. Because let me put it this way. When I used to go to Supreme drops, there were, I don't want to mention names, but there were certain people that were up and coming designers at the time trying to make it as designers. And over time, a lot of people that I was in Supreme lines with, and at that point, all of us were kind of just interested in clothes. We were kind of using it to make money, but also we were interested in working in fashion as an industry, and that was our entryway into it. So there were designers, stylists, photographers, all people trying to do their own thing. And fast forward 10 years later, almost everyone that I was in the line with is like successful in fashion. It's really strange. Like there's at least 5 designers in my head now that are very well-known designers who I used to line up at Supreme drops with. Same thing with photographers and stylists. And it felt like a community. Like we all used to do stuff with each other. We used to work with each other. So it started as a community of kids into clothes, but it became more than that. I started talking to Samuel Ross, who of course founded A Cold War, because I went to one of his first sample sales and he just remembered me from then. And then over time, we've been talking. So I do think that there's a genuine community in London, to be honest. There's a genuine fashion community. I think the part of having friends into clothes is actually part of it. There would be no fashion community if no one in the community is interested in fashion in the first place. I think that's the glue. So I definitely think there are very genuine fashion communities in London, personally, from my experience at least. If Demna had to go to another house, where would you place him? I honestly think that Demna would be amazing at Margiela because Of course, at Balenciaga, a lot of his ideas are from Margiela, whether it's the incognito stuff, a lot of the way of doing things is very Margiela, what he does at Balenciaga. The only issue with that is Balenciaga is so much smaller. Sorry, Margiela is so much smaller than Balenciaga as a brand in terms of size. So I can't see a world in which Demna goes from Balenciaga to Margiela unless it's more of a passion project. Like he's like, I know I'm going to be paid less, but I'm so passionate about Margiela that I'm going to go there. And he used to work there anyway. Before he went to Balenciaga, he was a designer at Margiela, amongst other places. So it would be like a grand return to one of the brands that he started in when he got his start in fashion after school. So it would be cool. I think Demna would really work at Margiela, to be honest. As a fashion journalist, how can you help people understand the business decisions that are impacting end product outside of design? Rachel, can you clarify? So when you say impacting end product outside of design, what do you mean? Do you mean like how business decisions are affecting quality? Stuff like that. I'd like to know. I'll see what you say after. Oh, okay. Rachel continued. Since average people rarely see in our daily lives, how can we understand and communicate about quality and fashion in the public discourse so we aren't paying $5,000 for jelly shoes? I normally tell people that it's very hard to talk about quality in fashion because it's such a nuanced conversation, and I feel like sometimes the conversations that we have about quality online are very simplistic. So someone will see something that's polyester and be like, oh, it's trash because it's polyester. And it's fashion is more nuanced than that. There's so many different ways that you can make polyester. Is it a synthetic fabric? Yes, but it depends what you're going for. For example, Issey Miyake, Un Plissé, Pleats Please, that's polyester, but that polyester has a lot of properties that are very favorable, right? If you want to pack your clothes into a tiny amount of space, you can do it with those Issey Miyake pieces. If you want something that you never need to iron, you can just straight out of the washing machine after it's been dried, you can just put it on. It's good for that. It's very sweat wicking. It's very lightweight. So not just because something is polyester doesn't automatically make it bad. And then even within polyester, there are different grades. Every fabric has different grades. So for example, wool as a fabric, it depends how, starting with the animals, how they are raised. That determines the quality of the fibers. Then it becomes how they are extracted from the animals. Then it becomes how these fabrics are treated. How well are they treated? Then it becomes how well are they dyed? In all these processes, that wool can be damaged. So depending on how you treat it, depending on how you clean it, you can damage it more than other people depending on the process. Depending on how you dye it, you can damage these fabrics more. So because I've worked in fashion for so long, I can just feel a fabric and see it and then in my mind determine all these things. But if you haven't worked in fashion for long, it's very hard to understand that. And so that's why it's hard for me to really comment on quality of things unless I have experience with it, or unless it's just completely obviously bad quality. In the case of, let's say, a jewelry is a very good example. A lot of brands, they used to use 24 karat gold, now they use gold plated brass. That's a very obvious, you don't need to be there. They're cutting corners. They're selling the same jewelry that used to be 24 karat gold, now it's gold toned metal, or gold plated brass. That is obviously a case where you can obviously say, even just looking at it online, yeah, they're cutting corners, it's bad quality. It's easy to do that. But when we're talking about cottons and wools and stuff, it becomes very difficult to make that argument, or to even really say with complete certainty how good quality something is. And so most times when I have a conversation about quality online, I normally talk about, oh yeah, I have experience with these pieces from these brands. The quality isn't great. But even that is subjective, because Once again, quality can change season to season. So one season, a brand can have fabrics that are really terrible, and then the next season, it's a completely different story. And that's where we get into brands that are more consistent. There are brands that are way more consistent with their quality than others. So it really depends. It's a very, very nuanced conversation. It's very it's hard to just for me to just look at stuff and be like, that's good quality, that's shit, without feeling it or being close to it or having any experience with the kind of fabrics that a certain brand uses. Someone says Tuba is a great styling YouTuber. I totally agree, although the reason why I didn't mention Tuba is because I think of Tuba has really good style, by the way. I love her style so much. Her style is sensational. But she doesn't only make styling videos. I feel like Tuba Avalon also makes videos about brands and how a brand has influenced the way people dress in society or how a brand is influencing a trend. So I think she kind of sits in multiple niches. She isn't just the styling YouTuber. She doesn't just talk about clothing she wears, which is why I didn't want to box her in, if that makes sense. That's why I didn't mention her. Someone says, only just discovered Mary's Room. Yeah, Mary's Room is amazing, by the way. I'm a big fan of her content. How to get into the fashion industry if you are a neurodivergent person, like if you have ADHD, medium or low support needs, autism, dyslexia, OCD. So the Doll Wizard, it's interesting because I feel like I have loads of friends in fashion who have ADHD and are autistic. I think actually the creative industry is a lot more open-minded to people who are neurodivergent. I think it's actually easier to get into an industry like fashion if you're neurodivergent versus something more traditional like law or finance. So I don't really know if I have any advice for that, because I think if you just be yourself, your neurodivergent self, in all your glory, I think you'll be fine in fashion, to be honest. Okay, Alyssa says, thank you. I try to go to fashion networking events whenever I go to NYC. Good idea. Good idea. Let's see. I'm trying to keep up with these comments. Oh my God. I feel like fashion, especially high fashion, is one of the most gatekeeping industries. It's not the easiest industry to navigate. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But luckily, we have people now who are breaking those barriers and destroying those shackles. So we have so many different YouTubers. There are people that work in the industry now that make online content. So I think everything is being de-gate kept in a sense. But that's definitely a problem. It's still a big problem. Definitely still a big problem. But I think it's not as bad as it was before. Why do you dress like you do when you're interested in fashion? Do you just like to look at it? Um, I think it depends because I always get comments like this where it's like, you dress really basic, but you're interested in really abstract fashion. And my response to this is always, I dress like this in my videos because where I am, this is my living room, guys. That's my painting in my living room. That right there behind me is my dining table where I eat my food. And that blue chair right there is what I sit on to watch TV. This is my living room. So in my living room, because this is what I wear around the house, I'm wearing a sportswear t-shirt, like a quarter zip, a sportswear t-shirt, and a hat. This is literally how I look walking around my house, and I'm wearing shorts and socks. So on a live stream, because this is my living room, this is what I wear. When I leave my house, I don't dress like this. So I think it depends. But obviously, most people don't see me outside. Most people see me online in my bedroom or in my living room. So people assume that that's my style, I guess. And I just find it really weird dressing up the way I would outside in a for a video, it seems really odd. Wearing like blazers and all this jewelry, it would feel really inauthentic to me. I know there are people that do that, but I think it's more authentic to them. But to me, I think it would be really inauthentic. So that's why I wear the same quarter zip in every video, the same zip sweater, essentially. So yeah, my rebuttal to this would be I don't actually dress like this when I leave my house. How are so many fashion girlies in entry level, even mid-level jobs so dripped out in Rick and Balenci Bottega? They can't all be funded by Bank of Mum and Dad. So obviously, this is my anecdotal experience, but my personal experience, take it with a grain of salt, is in fashion, most people that work in fashion are rich. So most places I've worked in fashion, people are rich, whether they have rich parents or they have a rich wife or they have a rich husband. So it's never, the money never comes from their job. The money always comes from something external. So that's why I know so many people that work in fashion and they're on jobs that, you know, they make 25 to 30K, which is like a normal, like entry level, mid level salary in the UK, maybe 40K, 50K, whatever. That's not the kind of salary that if you have responsibilities and you have to pay rent and bills in London, you can afford to be buying Rick and Bottega out the wazoo. So obviously the money comes from somewhere else. So my experience most times is it's being funded by a partner or just being rich in general, like having rich parents or a family or whatever. So that's why. Captain Dead says, how do you dress how you want to dress in the UK if you live in High Wycombe? Before I got into fashion, the most fashionable guy in the area was a guy with a Nike tag. I honestly think it depends. It depends because I've lived in places that are not the most fashion forward, I guess. And I wear some crazy outfits and I just, because I don't care. Yes, will people look at you funny unless you're in London? And even London is not this amazing utopia. There are parts of London where if you're not in Soho or you're not in Shoreditch or Dalston, people are still going to look at you funny. So you just have to wear what you want to wear, express yourself how you want to, but just have an understanding that there might be some people that will look at you strange because, you know, people are weird and most people don't express themselves the way they want to express themselves. They're scared of how they're going to be judged. So everyone just kind of looks the same. That's kind of society for you. So once you get over that, I think you'll be fine. Now, there is a caveat to that because, of course, in certain aspects, there's a risk of violence. So if you're in an area where there's a risk of violence, maybe don't do it. Because I've definitely walked in parts of London and I've been called homophobic slurs before, just based off wearing like a Rick Owens skirt or something like that. But I've never actually, no one has actually ever resorted to violence against me, but I know there are certain areas where that might happen. So I'm not, you know, naive and I'm just going to say, wear what you want. And then someone gets, you know, knocked out for wearing something. I think just be careful where you are, be aware of your surroundings, be aware of like the temperature, but also express yourself as much as you want to within reason. But yeah, Venus says, is African fashion too Western inspired? I believe so. I don't think so. I think this is one of those cases where it depends where you look. There are so many African brands. I think, do you know what it is? I think there's a bias, and the bias is that the African brands that are known in the West are African brands that appeal to the West. So by default, they are going to be Western adjacent because that's why they appeal to Western buyers, Western stores, Western customers. The ones that don't appeal to the West, of which there are probably more brands, are all the brands that aren't, you know, that Western inspired. So I don't think that African fashion is too Western inspired. I think our perceptions might be skewed if we consume a lot of fashion media, of Western journalists, Western fashion, you know, then you might start to think that. But I don't believe that to be true. What direction do you think Sarah Burton should take Givenchy? More McQueen or down the Ricardo route? I think more McQueen because that's what she's good at. I think with Sarah Burton makes really amazing tailoring with an edge. And I think that's where Givenchy is going towards. I remember talking about this earlier, actually. I visited the Givenchy Atelier in Paris. I've spoken about this was it the last live or the live before that? But essentially, I was showing you guys the images of the designs that the team made, and they were running me through all the designs, what the inspirations are. And it seems that the team are very much going in a direction of classic, wearable, but high quality clothing. And I think Sarah Burton should just continue that, but add her McQueen edge to it. I think that would be the perfect Givenchy in this climate, at least. So I honestly think that's the direction she's going to go in, and I think that's the direction she should go in, to be honest. Someone says, is Demna out of ideas, or is he just forced to put out cash cows like the pret-a-porter feckless shirts with prints? Damn. So let me put something on the screen that all of you guys should check out, actually. So, this is an interview on YouTube. It's called Rethinking Heritage. Let me just play it so you guys can have it playing in the background. But essentially, this is an interview with Kathy Horan and Demna Vesalia. And it's essentially Demna just talking through his idea of Balenciaga, what Balenciaga is, why his version of Balenciaga is the way that it is, how he's changed the perception of what Balenciaga is, asking questions of what does luxury mean in the modern day? Why does it have to be this way? Why does it have to be that way? What is Balenciaga to the modern consumer? What does that mean? A very, very good interview, by the way. I didn't agree with a lot of the perspectives, both from Kathy Horan and Demna, but it's honestly probably the best interview by Demna online. And I reacted to it on my Patreon. If you guys want to see that, if you're on the Patreon, you can watch that. I reacted to the whole interview and gave my thoughts. So if you're interested, check that out. But why I'm mentioning this is because in the interview, he talks about the fact that merchandisers have a very strong say in terms of what the stores look like, the garments that go into the stores. And his design process is very much this collaborative effort with the marketing team and the merchandisers who essentially tell him, Demna, we like these ideas. However, last season, these black trousers really sold a lot. So whatever you do, we just need some form of black trousers that mimic what we saw last season so we can continue selling these. And so he mentions his frustrations with the commerciality of fashion and how important it is for him to sustain having a job at Balenciaga and how much that influences his design. He literally says it in this interview. So I think it's kind of a balancing act. And I know I say he's out of ideas because I'm more editorializing. I don't necessarily think he's out of ideas. I just think that sometimes he does a lot of gimmicks. I wouldn't say that he's completely out of ideas, even though I've said it before, but I'm editorializing. I think that Demna he has a signature look. He has a signature design aesthetic. I like it. I like his signature aesthetic, but I do think that there are aspects of it that could be improved. I still think that a lot of his work, he just jacks Margiela one of one, like a lot of the incognito stuff. Even the most recent Balenciaga collection, that is a straight off, not the whole collection, obviously, but like the incognito glasses, those kind of things. That is a straight off Margiela ripoff, literally. And he still rips off Margiela a lot. That's one aspect that I'm always critiquing him about. But I'm actually a big fan of Demna. I don't think he's out of ideas. I just think that he has this balancing act that he has to juggle, and it's very hard. It's a very difficult thing to do, to be honest. Look at me being nice to Demna for once. Because I think because I critique designers sometimes, people forget that I'm actually fans of these designers. I'm just critical because it's my job to critique their work. Satan Lucifer. Oh, this is talking about when I was talking about the quality of fabrics. The natural fibers only community on social media is so simplistic and infuriating to me. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. There's a subsector of um online fashion where they're like, if it's not natural fibers, it's bad quality, which obviously is wrong. It's just outright wrong. It's not correct. It's not a correct viewpoint to have on fashion. They make it seem like if it's a natural fiber, then it's high quality. And it's funny because there are lots of natural fibers that can be horrible quality if they are damaged in the treatment process and things that I was talking about earlier. So it really depends. There's so much nuance in it. But yeah, I see those kind of things online all the time where it's like, oh my god, this is made with this fabric. This is terrible quality. It's like not necessarily. Not necessarily. Why does high fashion only cater to certain body types? I've had an experience where I would buy a beautiful piece, but it didn't look as great because of my bigger bust. So I'm going to be very honest and say that when it comes to women, it's a lot more difficult because for me as a man, if you think of fashion design, I think the range of bodies for women is a lot more vast than for men because men, for the most part, some men have boobs, but for the most part, very few men have boobs. So, for example, designers won't have to account for the chest area, or the only thing that men might have is a big belly or thick thighs or maybe bigger arms. So it's easier to kind of make a base pattern that will fit most men. Now, when it comes to women, the range is so there are women that have, you know, big hips, big boobs, smaller boobs, big bums, smaller bums. And the proportions of women are so much more vast that it's very, very difficult to cater for a wide range of women's bodies. And so, what a lot of these fashion brands do, because they're kind of just doing the bare minimum, is they just they make clothing for skinny women because there's the range of shapes for skinny women is a lot less. So it's easier to design for skinny women. And they just leave it at that. And when they make bigger sizes, they scale the sizes rather than redesign the patterns for women of different body types, which is obviously cutting corners. It's the easy way out. But that's kind of what happens. However, I will say that you just need to find the brands that work for you. There are still luxury brands that cater to different body types. So me, for example, I'm very tall, but most of my height is in my legs, and my arms are really long. My torso is really tiny. So I need jackets, for example, that have elongated sleeves and they are cropped in the body to some sense. So that's why I love Rick Owens and wear a lot of Rick Owens, because the silhouette of Rick Owens is exactly what I'm looking for. I can't wear Prada. I would look stupid. I can't wear Bottega. I would look dumb because it doesn't fit me correctly. The sleeves will be here. This is how the sleeves will look because the sleeves aren't elongated. So it'll look like I'm wearing my younger brother's blazer. And then the body will be too long because I have a short torso. So you just have to find out what works for you. For me personally, brands like Yoji, Andumela Meister, brands like Random Identities, perfect fit, Random Identities, Rick Owens. So I think it just depends. It really just depends. Rachel says, I feel like if people, average regular people, would sew in our daily lives, we'll buy with so much more intelligence. 100%. If I hadn't worked in the fashion industry for so long, I probably wouldn't have a clue, which is why I don't blame anyone for not knowing, right? I don't see how you would know unless you sew or you have a lot of experience working with fabrics and different clothes. Um, there's a lot of learning that needs to go on there. So yeah, if a lot of people made their own clothes, a lot of people would have a stronger sense of quality. I actually believe that if people started sewing their own clothes, the luxury fashion industry would disintegrate because most luxury brands, their quality is horrible, or for the price they are charging. I'll put it this way: for the price they are charging, the quality is absolutely atrocious. And when people start having more experience with fabrics and clothes, I feel like more people just wouldn't be okay with spending that amount of money on clothing that's that badly made. with stitching that's that bad and finishing that's that bad, or unline like blazers with no lining and stuff like that. It's insane. So yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Rachel says, I wish we could have these types of technical discussions more often. Maybe I need to do a live stream just talking about fabrics and the nuances within fabrics, but that would be a very long conversation. And I come at it from different perspectives. I come at fabrics from the perspective of someone that the first degree that I did was in chemical process and material engineering. So there's a very scientific way that I look at materials and fabrics from a materials engineering standpoint. And then I went to fashion school. So I have a very broad understanding of like fabric. So I could talk about materials and fabrics forever, literally, but that's definitely a good idea for a video or live stream in the future for sure. Elle says there are a few creators that go to stores and critique the quality of expensive clothing and talk construction materials quality. That's amazing. Can you mention some of them in the chat? I actually want to follow some of these people because I don't think I'm aware of too many people that do that, to be honest. There's who's the guy that does the leather? Tanner Leatherstein, I think. He's really good. He's, from my understanding, a leather craftsman who pulls apart luxury goods and tests the quality of the leather and stuff. Very, very good person to subscribe to if you're trying to learn about which brands have good quality fabrics and which ones don't, especially with leather specifically. Let's see. Is it still worth going to St. Martin's nowadays as a fashion-minded young person living in the UK? Or is it better to spend that time networking instead? So my answer would be, it depends on your circumstance. It's not really a black and white thing. I would say if you can afford to go to CSM, then go. Because I know that there is a subsector of fashion or whatever that, and I still believe that you don't need to go to fashion school. There are so many people that I can mention right now off the top of my head that are extremely successful in fashion and also extremely skilled designers that didn't even go to fashion school. So it's not necessary, but I think it helps. And especially now where there's more competition in fashion design, everyone has an online brand. One way that you can cut through the noise is just by having a fashion degree. I think people take you more seriously automatically. And secondly, the CSM network is insane. I can't stress to you how insane the CSM network is. I've told this story before. I'll tell you guys the story again. When I was at CSM, for people that don't know, I study fashion journalism at CSM. When I was at CSM, Thames and Hodgson reached out to CSM to recommend one of the journalism students to work with them. So because I had an online platform and I'd already worked with brands, I'd done stuff with Stone Island and stuff like that, they thought that I would be a good fit because I had experience working with brands. So my teacher, one of my teachers, put my name forward for Thames and Hodgson. And because they put my name forward, I worked with Thames and Hodgson on their Versace catwalk book. I got to interview Tim Blanks. I got to do the press run. I got to meet Donatella Versace. I also did the press run for the Chloe book. I interviewed Lou Stoppard, who wrote the book. I did all of that. All of that came from CSM. And the Versace side of things, I got that through CSM. The Chloe stuff was because I did a good job with the press run of the Versace launch. They reached, Thames and Hodgson got back to me and said, oh, based on, the work we did last time, we would love to work with you again for the Chloe book. And now Thames and Hodgson is one of the clients that I work with. And I wouldn't have that if I didn't go to CSM because I got the opportunity just being in CSM. And that's the thing, because the CSM network is so strong, so many brands work with CSM, so many companies work with CSM. There's so many awards that fashion designers can win. There are so many companies that look to CSM to hire designers. So as much as I know people online do try to act like, there's no need to go to fashion school. And honestly, there isn't. You can survive without going. But if you can afford it, the advantage that going to CSM gives you is so insane. I've just told you one story that I've had at CSM. I got so many opportunities being at CSM. I can't even begin to go into it. So I think if you can afford it, if it works for your circumstance, then I would always say go, then not. But going to CSM is really expensive, especially if you're an international student. Everyone has a different circumstance. I'm lucky that I'm a home student, so of course my fees, as someone that was, born in the UK citizen, UK passport, my fees are a lot less than an international student. So I think it just depends on your circumstances. But the opportunities that CSM affords you, and it's not even just about tangible opportunities like that I got. It's also things that you can't really measure. So, for example, I was at the McQueen show, and I won't mention names, but there's someone really big in fashion media who I met, who also went to CSM many years before I went to CSM. And just because I went to CSM and it was like, oh, you went to CSM, who was your teacher? Oh, that was my teacher. And we just became friends because we kind of had that point of reference with each other. And it was something that we could talk about, and it was easier to make conversation. And that's someone really important in the fashion industry. So it even becomes easier to network. So that's what I'm saying. There's many positives to going to CSM. There are some negatives too, but a lot of positives too. Someone says there's tons of low grade, cheap cashmere now because of the cashmere craze that happened in fashion. So quality fabric really depends on where it's sourced, how it's woven, and construction. Exactly. Like, I have a video on my channel. I can't remember exactly what it's called. I think it's called something along the lines of why denim in Japan is so, why the quality of denim in Japan is so good. And in that video, I was talking to a woman from Belgium that runs a really successful denim brand, and all her denim is sourced in Japan. And we were talking about the reason why Japan denim quality is so strong is because they have these really old machines that a lot of countries don't have, where they weave the denim very tightly together. And in a lot of countries, they don't have the same machinery, so they can't weave denim as tightly. And that's why Japanese denim is like, the quality is amazing. So once again, so many different factors that determines high grade fabrics. I find it really simplistic when people go cashmere good, polyester bad. It's so simplistic, so simplistic to talk about fabrics and quality of garments in that way. It's way too simplistic. The old mule says, what did you make of the latest McQueen show? So I won't tell you my thoughts, only because I'm doing a live stream on the McQueen show. So you will hear my thoughts then. I'm doing a dedicated live stream on the McQueen show. So that should be fun. Do fashion houses actually want good designers? Many good designs are expensive to manufacture and require expensive fabrics. Meanwhile, you can just slap the right gimmick onto the runway and sell. So honestly speaking, brands don't care about shit. All brands care about is money. As a designer, the reason why they hire you if they think you can make them more money, and that's the only consideration. That might coincide with designers that make interesting things, but from their viewpoint, it's all about money. It's not about anything else. So yeah, it's not really about how good designs are, because even how good a design is very subjective. What is the parameter we're using to determine if a design is good or not? What exactly, like, how do we judge that? But yeah, honestly, all they care about is money. Let's see. The old mule says, "Do you think it's time Anna Wintour steps down?" I don't really know. I know we joke around and say Anna Wintour, oh my god, she's been there for so long, like, give someone else a go. However, it depends what you value. Do you value a fresh tone of voice at Condé Nast? Do you value a fresh face, someone that's going to overhaul the whole thing and change the way that Condé Nast operates? or do you value experience? Something that almost no one has in fashion over Anna Wintour is experience. Anna Wintour has more experience than most people that are working in fashion right now because she's just so old and she's been in fashion for so long. She's been at Vogue since before I was born. That is how long she's been at Vogue and at Condé Nast in general as an institution since before I was born. So in terms of experience, you can't really beat her. So it then becomes, what do you value? Do you value experience or do you want to see freshness at Vogue? I think both are important. Experience is very important, but also a fresh perspective on things is also important. Let's see what Rachel said. I feel like people who work behind the scenes in fashion at runway shows, etc., dress in very functional ways because of their jobs, because the center of attention needs to be the designs on stage. Oh, yeah, that's very true. Also, when you think of designers, like Alexander McQueen's personal style, I know we have this conversation all the time. Let's see. Alexander McQueen's style. We have this conversation all the time, but Alexander McQueen's personal style, this man, let me go Lee McQueen because I'm not actually talking about the brand, I'm talking about the man. But this man was out here wearing, like, this is how he used to dress, like AstroTurfs and sneakers with baggy jeans and, stuff like this. That's the thing. Some creators also, they put so much energy and love and thought into their clothing that by the time they are done, they don't even want to think about what they wear personally is so far back in their mind. Like, can you imagine the average day of Alexander McQueen, the likes of the times when he was, let's say he was at Givenchy and doing his eponymous label, how many collections he was doing a year and how deeply researched his collections were, doing all that research, doing all that draping, doing all that. McQueen was someone that used to sit on the floor and sew things. Like, you just want something functional and something that's comfortable to wear. You can't be wearing all these extravagant things, being on the floor, trying to, fix a pattern. It's not practical. Joe says, how are you acclimatizing to the braces? So the braces hurt. My teeth are in absolute agony, which is why I took a break from streaming for a short while because I couldn't speak properly. Now I still feel like I can't speak properly, but it's okay. It's manageable enough for me to be able to stream again and make videos and content online again. But yeah, it definitely, my teeth hurt. I can't eat properly at the moment. I can't chew, so I'm eating yogurt and yogurt and soups and stuff. That's my diet. I bet you look stellar in a long wool coat and some tartan. If I say so myself, I have quite a few long wool coats, especially from Arndemel and Meister, that are amazing. I don't have anything that's tartan yet, but I want to get like a tartan skirt or something like that. Or something I really want to buy is like a kilt, like a really, really stylish kilt. But I just need to find the right one that I find interesting enough, one that works with my proportions, blah, blah, blah. Someone says sugar daddies for sure. That's funny. Wow, I'm looking at the comments. I've realized I'm so behind. I'm honestly so behind. The Nectar Man says, you were wearing a baseball cap and Supreme Tea and grey hoodie in a film Talk B. Why are you saying? Yo, online is hilarious. I swear to God, online comments are so funny. um, I can wear whatever I want. Like, me dressing like this way, I might dress like that sometimes. Most of the time, I just don't dress like that. The reason why I actually dress in a very, let me not say ostentatious, because that's not the right word, but dress in a very out there way is because I work from home most of the time. So when I leave my house, I use it as an opportunity to dress up because I don't get many opportunities to. In the case of my interview, it was raining heavily. So it was raining heavily. I wasn't necessarily going anywhere. I was just going to a studio to film an interview. So once again, going back into the concept of, it's weird for me to just sit on a couch and dress up to go and sit on a couch somewhere. That's odd to me. Me personally, if I'm going out to an event, to see my friends, going out in London, shopping, all those kind of things, that's when I dress differently. Um, so once again, the Nectar Man, like I said earlier, you guys see me on a screen somewhere. How I dress when I'm on a screen is completely different to when you see me off screen. If when you see me on screen, I'm going to be in two settings. I'm either in someone's bedroom or in someone's couch in someone's living room or in someone's studio, or I'm in my own bedroom or living room. That is not a very realistic representation of how I dress when I leave my house. The Nectar Man said no shade. Like I said, that's when you see me. It's different. That's when you see me. It's so interesting though. Online is so interesting that people think that they know you. Okay, maybe know you is not the right word. People think that they know every aspect of your life because they see you in front of a screen. That's insane. Just as a concept. Let's see. How deep is fashion? I watched a documentary on Tom Ford's Gucci 95 collection and people were so emotional. It seemed basic to me, and that's something I notice often. Why do people get so emotional in fashion? I guess people get emotional in fashion because it means something deeper to them. I think that whether fashion is deep or not depends on the individual. Some people, I don't know, some people look at fashion in a very pragmatic way. I have friends from university that work in finance and they don't tie any emotions to fashion. Fashion to them is just a very pragmatic, practical thing. I wear a suit because that's the work attire, and I dress this way because that's how, in their mind, a respectable man in society is supposed to dress and look. And there's no other consideration. To other people, the artfulness that goes into designs, the inspirations. It's very inspirational. It reminds them of a time. A designer might reference something that touches someone emotionally. So let's say someone like Jacques Mus. Jacques Mus says that the reason he started his brand is partially because of his mother. And so that might touch someone who maybe has also lost their mother or lost a family member. So when he has a collection that's very inspired by, oh, growing up with my mum used to be interested in these things, that might touch someone emotionally who it taps into their emotions in that sense. So I think it just depends. To you, you might be seeing blazers and shirts. To someone else, they might be seeing something else. And I don't think any opinion is right or wrong. I think people just go into fashion with different perspectives. I don't think one is necessarily better or worse than the other, to be honest. Oh, by the way, thank you so much, Nicole, for the super chat. I really, really appreciate it. Let's read what you've written here. What's a good mid-range quality brand for clothing and handbags? I want quality items that last a long time. That's interesting. I'm trying to think of mid-range brands that I buy because unfortunately, the brands I buy are quote unquote expensive, but not expensive for me because I have ways of, and I guess that's one of the perks of working in fashion where I have connections with brands directly. So I can buy clothing directly from brands for a wholesale price. So I can buy mainline Rick Owens for the price of a mid-range brand, if that makes sense. So I'm spending mid-range money for very expensive clothing. So it's hard for me to, I'm trying to think mid-range. Is Random Identities considered mid-range? Because the Random Identities pieces I have are really good quality. Not that won't that won't fill the void with handbags. but clothing wise, definitely. And it's not super expensive. Some of the pieces can be really expensive, but not a lot of it. I'm trying to think mid-range brands. I'm also trying to think because I don't buy a lot of clothing. Maybe I'm not the best person to ask this because I'm either doing the thing, like I said, where I'm buying wholesale, I'm buying things for wholesale prices, or I'm just thrifting. I like to go to Antwerp and shop there a lot because there are places like Labels Inc. and all these other places where you can get really cool pieces for like last time I was in Antwerp and I got all these crazy pieces for like 40 euros. And I shop on Depop and Vinted and Grailed a lot. So I'm probably not the best person to ask because most things I buy are not even new anyway. And the new stuff I buy is wholesale prices. But I buy secondhand most of the time. Nicholas says, why shop mid range when you've got super chat money? That's funny. Do you think high fashion brands should hire people who don't have fashion degrees? A lot of successful brands are individuals who don't have degrees, like Micha, Ralph Virgil. Yeah, like I said, as a designer, if you seek the right channels and you know what you're doing, you can be a successful designer without ever going to fashion design. I think the concept of degrees is outdated in the sense of you need a degree to have a job. If I was an employer, I don't employ anyone now, but maybe one day, if I eventually do, I care less. I cannot care 1 second about what qualifications you have. I literally do not care. All I want to know is how good are you at the specific job I'm hiring you for. So you can have all the degrees you want, but say I want a photographer, I'm just going to look at which photographer fits the aesthetic that I'm looking for the most. I could care less if you studied photography in school. And I think most companies are starting to understand this. And so people that are being hired at companies now, especially in very high positions, I don't think degrees are that important of a consideration. And it's the same thing with having a successful brand. I just think going to fashion school helps, especially if you go to the right fashion school. I spoke earlier about a lot of opportunities that I got going to CSM. It helps. It definitely helps, but you don't need it. If you're smart enough or you play your cards right enough, you can navigate fashion without needing all those things. There are so many people I know personally who I'm friends with who didn't go to fashion school and they are extremely successful, more successful than me who went to fashion school. So I don't think it's necessary. It just helps. And Lecture Man says, I'm definitely using editorializing when I'm reading somebody to film. When I say editorializing, what I mean is in journalism, sometimes what you do, you have a hook that hooks people into reading an article or hooks people into watching your video or hooks people into your sort of eliciting an emotional response or an emotional reaction. So sometimes I might editorialize and say certain things that I mean, but not in the sense that people might think I mean it. But I do it deliberately to elicit a response from people. Let's see what Leo says. My main issue is we are in an era for Demna where it is so iteration based and his gimmicks are becoming so null and void on what he is offering. I do think he can do more, but profit speaks. That's a fair enough critique, to be honest. That's fair enough critique. Thoughts on the Victoria's Secret show? First thing I will say, let me put it on the screen actually before I continue. Let me give you guys a really good recommendation. Let me show you guys this book quickly. So, before I even talk about the show, there is this amazing book by Chantal Fernandez and Lauren Sherman. They were both at Especially Chantal was at BOF when I used to work at BOF. Chantal was actually my editor when I was at BOF. So she was the person that I worked closely with at BOF. She was the person that would edit some of the articles that I wrote, give me feedback. Really important person, helped me navigate my way into the fashion industry a lot. So I owe a lot of things to Chantal Fernandez. But anyway, she left BOF. Right now, she's at The Cut. And she wrote this book that came out recently called Selling Sexy, which is all about the history of Victoria's Secret, how they're navigating the modern day after all the scandals that happened to Victoria's Secret, the market, where it sits in the market, the competitors, the likes of Savage Fenty, what Savage Fenty is doing better. Essentially, just read the book. There's a lot of really important information there. Now, with the context of that book, the Victoria's Secret show was horrible. With the context, part of it is because they don't make as much money as they used to, so the budgets are obviously less. However, regardless of what the budget is, that set for the Victoria's Secret show was so bare bones and lackluster. Horror show, terrible. The quality of some of the designs, horrible. So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of the Victoria's Secret show, but it's because it just seemed like, even though I know a lot of thought went into it, it just didn't seem like a thoughtful show. There are shows that have had a lot lower budgets that are way better, way more interesting, more inspirational, with designs that are better also. Yeah, just wasn't a big fan of the show, to be honest. Rachel says, yes, these kind of nuanced, complex discussions about quality are exactly why we need good fashion journalism. 100%. I also do think that it's very important for other fashion journalists to be acquainted with clothing from a creation standpoint, not just a critique. So, for example, I've worked in roles in fashion from marketing to actual creation of clothes, which gives me, and also just studying material science and chemical engineering, which gives me a stronger understanding of clothing other than just looking at it and looking at inspirations and fashion history and how that works and weaves into the ideas that a designer has. I think it's very important for fashion journalists also to have a very pragmatic understanding of clothing in the core essence of it. Like, what's a high quality finish? What are the different types of stitches? What are the different types of fabrics? How do you know the different grades of fabrics? What affects the quality of a fabric? I feel like every journalist needs to have a very pragmatic understanding of clothing like that, because I think it makes for good journalism, because you can talk about the clothing in a pragmatic sense, but also in an inspirational sense and in an artful sense. I was hoping you'd be wearing your headpiece from the Demna stream from a few weeks back. Oh wow, I'm really behind because guys are talking about when I was talking about my proportions. Okay, I might have to skip to all the way to, you know, what's going on right now. I feel like I'm extremely behind. Oh my god, I'm so behind. Let me catch up. Let me catch up. Let me catch up. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. The next man said, I think he's about to flame me. No, I didn't flame you. I'm just I was just essentially saying that, like, when you basically, all I'm saying is when you see people online, that's not a complete representation of who they are or what they represent or whatever. A lot of people's online lives are very curated. Like, people don't actually know me. Like, you don't know what I get up to when I'm not behind the screen. You don't know who I'm dating. You don't really know much about me other than I'm a fashion journalist that talks about fashion online and writes fashion articles. Do you know what I mean? So looking at me and what I wear in my living room and in studios as a representation of, oh, this must be his personal style. Those two things don't correlate. You know what I mean? So that was the point I was making. I'm not I'm not trying to flame you. I have no reason to flame you. It's just what you see. It's your observation. It's a very valid observation that you made. Venus says you do have regular 4-hour lives. That's a long-term relationship. Okay, I'm still catching up. Oh my god, I'm so behind. If I miss out your question, by the way, don't hesitate to re-ask it. It's just I can't keep up with the questions. So I'm trying my best. I'm honestly trying my best. Oh yeah, the whole Epstein saga with Victoria's Secret is definitely a thing. That's part of, yeah. There's so many things that happen at Victoria's Secret, to be honest, that we could get into, but there's just not even enough time to talk about all the shady things that happen behind the scenes, like abuse of models, people abusing their power. Even Epstein, there were reports of Epstein promising women that he would make them a Victoria's Secret angel, which obviously wasn't going to happen, but he used that as a way to, you know, abuse his power with women. And yeah, a lot of things happened. A lot. Is the creative director change at Dior coming? And is it Jonathan Anderson? To be honest, I don't. The rumor is that Jonathan Anderson is the lead runner to go to Dior, to be, people calling it a promotion. If you see it that way, I guess that depends on if he's paid more money. Hopefully he is. Anyway, that's the rumor. I don't know that to be fact. I'm going with the rumor because that's the rumor that a lot of sources have said, but I don't know for a fact. I'm not at LVMH. I don't work for LVMH. I might get info here and there from people that work there. I've heard at one point I heard rumors that John Galliano was going back there. Now the conversation is, the person that's going there is Jonathan Anderson. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. When it happens, and I'll be the first to discuss kind of what that means for Dior and what will happen at Dior if he goes there in the end. I think Victoria's Secret can get a revamp. It's just not time or the right backers. I just think, I don't even want to be mean because Victoria's Secret is a massive brand, which means that the Victoria's Secret show, so many people would have worked on it. And even though I thought it was absolutely horrible, that's not to say that all the people that worked on it don't know what they're doing. That's not it. It's most times, and I can tell you this from working in the fashion industry, most times it just comes down to what the person at the top wants. So always blame the person at the top. I've worked for a luxury brand. I'll give you an example. I've worked at a luxury brand where the target audience was women between the ages of 20 to, let's say, 35. Now, the CEO at the time, his idea of what luxury was kind of like the kind of campaign he wanted to do and the way he wanted to market the brand, to me, felt like the target audience was 45 to 60-year-olds. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But the way that you market to younger people is not the same way that you market to older people. It's just not the same. But because that was his vision of luxury, he kind of threw away the fact that the target audience of the brand is literally 20 to 35-year-old women. And he was just like, well, I'm the boss, so you're going to do what I say. And at that point in time, that's my job. What am I going to do? Tell the CEO no? Of course I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do what the CEO wants and says. Anyway, long story short, we did what the CEO wanted. Of course it didn't fucking work because we're marketing to the wrong people. And so the clothes didn't sell. And then the CEO blamed us, the team. And all of us were just looking at each other like, what? We've been telling this guy, like, the kind of audience that you want, that's not the kind of campaign that they would respond to. But because he pays our like, he's the person that decides whether we're fired or not, we just had to say yes and just take the blame when it didn't work. And that's how the fashion industry works, for people that don't know. So when I see the Victoria's Secret show, I just see some people at the top the people at the top level don't have a fucking clue. Because even when you read this book, the competitors of Victoria's Secret, not complete competitors, but there are brands like Savage Fenty, for example, that are completely collecting all the market share from Victoria's Secret because Savage Fenty is more interesting. They know how to market to younger people more effectively. They know how to do diversity in a way that doesn't feel like it was forced upon them. When I see Victoria's Secret doing anything diverse, it just feels like they're doing it because they're trying to avoid backlash. When I see Savage Fenty doing it, it feels like that's just how the brand is. It's just kind of intrinsic to what the brand represents. So once again, sometimes it is just the CEOs not knowing what the fuck they're doing. It's just the same thing at Burberry, right? When Burberry hiked the prices, all the people in the team might think, what a horrible decision. But the CEO is the person that determines ultimately who has a job and who doesn't. Obviously, they have managers under them who work closely with people under them and under them. But ultimately, if you're just outright speaking against what the CEO wants, and you're just like, no, that's not a good idea, you might get fired. So you're not going to do that. So it just depends with some of these brands. Sometimes it comes down to the person at the top having really horrible ideas. Actually, most of the time, that's really what the issue is. And they actually have really good staff, really smart people working, but they don't take the ideas of the people that actually have good ideas. Am I looking forward to the Chelsea versus Liverpool match? Not really, because we're going to lose. We are going to lose. Yes, agent provocateur is still a thing, by the way. It's definitely still a thing. Cap'em Dead says, do you think, what's her name, by the way? Cap'em Dead. Do you think after Demna Balenciaga would want to go back to original roots or continue adapting to Demna's already established aesthetic? Money talks about. Oh, that's a good question. So when Demna leaves Balenciaga, what will the aesthetic be? I don't know, because I think it depends who goes there. Because you would think that they would have to go in that specific direction, but I don't think so. For example, at Celine, we saw Eddie Simon go in a completely different direction to Phoebe Philo, but it didn't mean anything. Celine actually makes more money now than when Phoebe Philo was there. Now, part of it is to do with time. Most luxury brands trend upwards regardless of who's there. They just become better at marketing, and what sells isn't really the stuff that you see on a runway. It's the fragrances and it's the handbags and accessories. So most luxury brands trend upwards. Obviously, they have times when they struggle, like Burberry right now or Gucci, but for the most part, they trend upwards. So that kind of is neither here nor there, but it's just to let you know that a brand isn't going to necessarily suffer by going in a different direction if the designer there just has that much of a conviction in their design and that much of an audience that that audience is just going to flock to the brand. Like Eddie Simon's audience just went to Celine, literally. So even though they went in a completely different direction, if anything, they make more money now and they're doing better than they ever have. And the only reason why he left is because the LVMH executives felt like they gave Eddie Simon too much power. And he was collecting, shout out to Eddie Simon though, collecting royalties on campaigns and collecting royalties on the fragrance line. That is the dream of every creative director, to collect royalties on every single aspect of their work. Company name. Of course, I'm not going to tell you the company. I am not about to get sued by a massive brand. I just use it as an example without mentioning names. The people, maybe some people that I've worked with in the past are watching this live, they will know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, they will know exactly the situation I'm talking about. Delulu CEOs can run both IT companies and banks. Not understanding customers but having too much power can make a leader very toxic. I think it also depends. Like, it just depends. Some CEOs are really, really good and they know exactly what they're doing, and then some don't. That's at most companies, to be honest. Let's see. I'm trying to catch up. I'm trying to catch up. Who would you personally pick as the successor for Balenciaga after Demna? That's a great question. I think Glenn Martins can do a job at Balenciaga for sure. Um, if they want to go in the same direction that they're going now, I think Martine Rose would be a good, like a seamless transition. Especially because she worked there under Demna before anyway, especially on the menswear side. That would be a seamless transition if they want to go the same aesthetic, literally like boxy silhouettes. Footwear that's like exaggerated. Like Martine Rose has those boxy flat toe box loafers that are like super cartoony in a way. Sometimes she has a lot of pieces that are cartoony, similar to Demna. That would be very seamless. And quite a few people that could work. But like I said, there could also be designers that come with a completely different aesthetic and it would still work and they would make more money. Just depends. What old brand do you think will make a comeback into mainstream in the next year, similar to Bottega Veneta or Ferragamo? So a brand I'm hoping can make a comeback is Courrèges. First of all, I'm a big fan of Courrèges. I love what they've been doing in the modern day. Like past few collections, especially, it's a brand that they've tried to bring back so many times. I think now they're kind of, I don't know what their sales are like, but from a critically acclaimed collection standpoint, I think they've been doing really well. And I have enjoyed some of the recent stuff I've seen from Courrèges. So I'm hoping that Courrèges can make a mainstream comeback because I think your everyday person doesn't really know what Courrèges is. I don't even think they know that the brand exists. But that's a brand I definitely want to see make a comeback into the mainstream. He said, and bro still has the Insta questions. Yeah, we're getting a long stream chat. It's lit. I know this stream is almost 2 hours long, and I haven't even really gone to the Instagram questions yet. It's crazy. Also, Rachel, I agree with you. Fenty is better than Victoria's Secret in every way. I totally agree with you there. I totally agree with you. I'm too invested in Glenn at Margiela. I think everyone has sort of decided that Glenn Martins is just automatically going to Margiela. Obviously, it makes sense. Like OTB, Diesel, it makes sense. But let's just wait and see. Patience is a virtue. Does Fenty still have that scam subscription model run by Fab? I don't actually know, to be fair, so I can't really speak on that. So what I will say about science and fashion is extremely slow to adopt science. Like when it's so funny when MS started talking about mycelium and using mushroom leather and things like that and the innovations in that sense, it almost made me chuckle because in chemical engineering and material science in that world, we've been looking at so many different ways. I say we, like I'm a material engineer right now, but I'm talking about back then. People are already looking at so many different ways that you could use mushrooms. And I remember reading like so many science weekly reports back then using mushrooms to make different fabrics that mimic things, not just leather, but ways to synthesize mushrooms to make cotton and like different, just depends on how you change the chemical structure. But it's so like fashion is so slow compared to like most other industries. Fashion is extremely slow to adopt anything. I don't know why that is, because fashion is such a lucrative industry. These brands and conglomerates to make billions. I don't know why none of them want to invest in fabrics. Actually, that's a lie. I know why. I know why. Everything about these brands is about profit margins. And I think if they spend too much time developing fabrics, considering we've already said on the stream, and come to the conclusion that people don't really care about the quality of things and the quality of fabric. So if the average consumer doesn't care, why would they invest tens and hundreds of millions into making really innovative fabrics when it's just kind of like a cash loss. That wouldn't make sense commercially and financially for these companies. So that's probably why. But yeah, in a nutshell, fashion is one of the slowest industries to adopt to change and technology and science, for sure. Rachel loves Courage. She says the old Courage fragrances are cool too. I totally agree. I totally agree. Any brands that are taking advantage of the big brands' delay in using the new tech? Mm, I mean, there's a few brands that do techie stuff, but to me, it's not. It's innovative in the sense of fashion, but it's not innovative in the sense of science, if that makes sense. So, for example, a brand that I really love, Anrelige, a Japanese brand, they do all these like really funky things, like a jacket where you put your phone in a pocket and it blocks out the phone signals, or all these kind of things. But the idea of a pouch that blocks phone signals is such old technology. But because it's all these things are newly integrated into fashion, it seems innovative. But from a science perspective, it's not. This is very old technology, you know what I mean? So there are brands that take advantage of these things, like temperature changing fabrics, but these things aren't new. It's not, the technology isn't new. People are just deciding to adopt these things way later. That's why Coperni wind me up so much. They swear they are cutting edge just because they use science project gimmicks from 20 years ago. Damn. I would say that Coperni can be a bit gimmicky. It can definitely be a bit gimmicky. I think a lot of times when I see some of the gimmicks, it honestly feels like they do it because it's going to create buzz on social media, which is a very good marketing strategy for any brand, to be honest. But yes, they do a lot of gimmicks sometimes. Yeah. And a lot of the gimmicks that they do are not as cutting edge as people make it out to seem. Like, it's very old technology. But let me in defense of Coperni, it's old technology, but because once again fashion is so slow to adopt technology and science, I understand why people see some things that they do and they're like, oh my god, did you see what they did? It's so innovative. They're using these fibers. But if you're someone like me that studied material science and stuff like this in school, where when you study that kind of degree, you think you're going to work in that industry. I didn't end up working in that industry, but because you think you're working in that industry, when you're there, you're reading magazines of like what's going on in fabric innovation and what are different labs doing for different things. What is the innovation? So I remember reading stuff back then that I'm only seeing brands start to talk about now. So in my mind, I'm like, oh my god, like that technology is old, but I get why people see it as innovative. So in their defense, for a fashion perspective, from a fashion perspective, some stuff that they do is innovative in terms of its application to fashion as an industry or application to clothing. Luke says, why are you avoiding the designer tier list video? So to be very honest, for guys that don't know, Luke is a very trusty member of the channel. And Luke kindly made like a fashion tier list. Like let me show you guys actually, so I can put it, see if I still have the link. I'll put it on the screen now so you guys can see. Because I'll actually address this. Because there's a reason why I haven't made a video yet. I'll tell you why. Let's see. Okay, cool. So Luke was so kind as to make this. So I plan on, I don't know if I'm going to make a video or do a live stream, whatever one works better, whichever one you guys prefer. I want to do a live stream. It's so weird, right? Because with YouTube, doing a video gets you more views and it means I'll make more money doing videos than live streams. But the reason why I end up streaming every time is because I think that my audience gets more from me streaming than making a video. You get more context because if I make a video, I'm just going to tell you my opinion. And if you have any further questions, then you talk to each other in the comments and that's it. If I have a live stream, I give you my opinion, but then you ask questions along the way and I answer those along the way as well. So that's why I just think there's more value with a live stream, but obviously not everyone watches the live streams because they're really long. So you have to kind of weigh it. But the reason why I haven't made this video yet is solely because I cannot be asked for the amount of hate I'm going to get when I make it. I will make it eventually. Don't worry, Luke. At some point, it could be a month, it could be 2 months, it could be 3 months. But I will eventually make this video because it's such a good. I feel like so much education in terms of fashion history can come from me making a video like this. But I just know I'm going to piss people off. For example, I'll give you a very quick example. I don't think Christian Dior, obviously he's a fashion legend, but if you put him on a tier list against so many other legends, like he's going to be so many tiers below someone like Cristobal Balenciaga, for example. But that might piss people off, for example. People might be, oh my God, this guy doesn't know fashion. And people are going to get mad. And obviously, inherently, I don't know who everyone's favorite designer is, but if I have your favorite designer down low on the tier list, people are going to get offended. They're going to take it as a personal attack on them. And I just can't be asked at the present moment. So that's why I haven't done it. I just can't be out. But one day I'm just going to be on demon time. And the day that I'm on demon time, I'm just going to do it. The day I'm on demon time, like even now, I'm just looking at the faces and I'm already putting the tier list in my head. I'm already sorting out the designers. And I can see how pissed off certain people would be. Also, Luke, why is Mima Viglizio? Is that Mima Viglizio in the tier list? Why did you put Mima Viglizio in the tier list? Unless I'm not looking properly, it could be someone else. That picture looks like Mima. The Nectar Man says, "I want to be a trustee member." You have to be super active in the Discord. Dude, mushroom absorb radiation. They use them to clean up Chernobyl. Fashion houses not into saving the world. Yeah, I know. But like I said, fashion is very slow to adopt any form of technology. It's just how it goes. Science. Tarek says, so funny. I got a Solar Junior a few years ago. It seems so revolutionary in 2015, but the tech is fundamentally old with a novel application. Exactly. But I still appreciate it though, because someone has to make these science applications to fashion. And since no one wants to do it, it's good to see some brands do it. I will also say that as much as I say a lot of this technology is old, there are designers that have also done it a really long time ago. So someone like Issey Miyake, I think that people do, and maybe this is something, let me see if Issey Miyake is on this tier list actually. If he's not, we need to add him because he's definitely going to be way at the top. Big reason being that when people think of Issey Miyake, I think they just think of pleats and shit. Issey Miyake is one of the most innovative designers of all times. Of all time, the way he made new fabrics, new ways of thinking about the way you design clothes, new ways of presenting clothes. Like Issey Miyake is, to me, one of the most revolutionary designers of all time, to me. And I think it's such a disservice that some things that we see as innovative right now, Issey Miyake did that shit in the 90s. Like people will be like, oh my God, look at this like bamboo jacket. And I'm like, Issey Miyake did that ages ago. Issey Miyake was using bamboo to make clothes ages ago. All these like pineapple to make fabrics. Issey Miyake did that ages ago. Ages ago. So once again, even though fashion is slow to adopt these things, there are also designers when you look in fashion history that have done all this stuff anyway. But yeah, can I see Issey Miyake on this list? Let me see. Let me have a quick scan. I see Charles Frederick Worth. I see Charles James. Christian Dior. Issey Miyake. Let's see. Hmm. I'll look later. I'll look later. I'll look later. Lycene because Luke needs to be talking shit the whole time. That's so funny. Okay, Luke says it's oh, is that Donatella? She look oh my god. You know what? That is Donatella now that I look at it. Do you know what it is? Sorry. When I think of Donatella, I think of the way she looks now. Because obviously I've met her. So I don't see Donatella's look. And from a distance, she was looking like Mima Veglizia. And I was like, why is Mima Veglizia on a I'm a big fan of her, by the way, but I'm like, why is she on a fashion designer tier list? Um, okay, yeah, that is Donatella. Now that you mention it, that is Donatella. Okay, Luke says Issey Miyake is on the list. Third row to the right. Okay, let me have a look. Ah, okay. I see him. I see him. He is there. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Luke says, read the chat. He's next to Gaultier. Also, another thing about this tier list is you're going to get the, even though probably before I start the tier list, I'm going to have a disclaimer like, guys, there are so many legendary designers across fashion history that if I was to do the most accurate tier list, it would have to have 2,000 plus names. And who the hell is going to do that? So it's just the curated list of designers. There's still going to be so many comments of, oh, you left this person out. How can you have a tier list and so isn't there? How can you have a tier list and this person isn't there? How can you have a tier list and that person isn't there? The fact that this person's not on the list, how can there even be a fashion tier list? So there's going to be a lot of that too. You can't satisfy everyone with the tier list. It's just never going to happen. So, like I said, I just need to be on some extreme demon time to to do this tier list, to be honest. Daniel Lee's thirst trap pick is sending me. Luke, I honestly, obviously, I'm going to do the tier list eventually, but Luke, I think you're kind of mean because the names that you put on this list, Luke knows fully well that some of these names have absolutely no business being here. They're going straight to the D tier, like by default. Like Luke is mean. Luke put a few people there that I'm like, you are mean because you know automatically they're going to the bottom tier immediately. They're just there to fill the bottom tier list. And I feel like he kind of did that deliberately. I kind of feel like he did that deliberately. I won't mention who they are. I'll say later. And I'll try to be objective. Like even looking at this list, for example, just to give you some ideas of how I'm going to judge things. Andy Millemeister is my favorite designer. However, let me look at how many tiers there are. Yeah, so I wouldn't put Andy Millemeister in the S tier, even though she's my favorite designer, only because if I'm being objective, designers like Alexander McQueen, Cristobal Balenciaga, Issey Miyake have just done more for fashion historically, innovation wise. That if I'm being realistic, there's no way you can put Under Mister on the same level with people like Cristobal Balenciaga, Alexander McQueen, Issey Miyake. So that, for example, yeah, I will add more tiers actually. I think there needs to be more tiers. But that's an example. So I won't even have my personal bias there. I'll be very objective. Luke says it's more fun if you add more tiers. I'll write it down to add more tiers. But yeah, anyway, that's my long-winded way of answering your question, Luke, as to why I've been avoiding doing the video. I just need to be in a certain mind frame. I need to be in complete demon time to do it. He's adding a Z tier. No, I wouldn't do that. I don't want to be that mean. I probably have to have another disclaimer that every single designer in this list is a legendary designer in some respect. Maybe not all. Because I think in this list there might be Dilara Findikoglu. I don't know if I'll go as far as to call her a fashion legend. Which is why I said that I think Luke is a bit mean, because whether I think Dilara is a good designer or not, in a list that contains Azzedine Alaya, I'm looking at some of the people there. Azzedine Alaya, Elsa Schiaparelli, Alexander McQueen, Chris Balenciaga, Coco Chanel. It's just unfair. It's honestly just unfair. So there's that. But I will have to have the caveat that all these designers, bar maybe a few, are actually successful designers and are really legendary. So I'm comparing them to each other. There's already a base level of where this list starts, but what I'm doing in the tier list is comparing them to each other. Because I know there'll be people that get sensitive and make it out like I'm saying someone's a trash designer just because they're at the bottom of the tiers. But that's not necessarily the case. Some of them, it could just be a time thing. Like, I think that right now, I'm just looking at the list once again. I'm kind of almost doing the tier list without doing it. What have you guys done to me? But I'm looking at the list now, and I'm seeing Kane and Amia's face. Now, I cannot objectively put Kane and Amiya on the same level or higher than someone like Yoji Yamamoto, right? That is more so a time thing. But Kane and Amiya, to me, is an extremely innovative designer. So even if I put him quite low, because maybe a lot of names on this list, just impact-wise, have had more impact, on a skill level, he's as skilled as a lot of the designers on this list. So there are so many different parameters that you can use to judge it. But me putting Kane and me on a lower tier doesn't mean that I think of him less as a designer that people might make out when I make the video. It's just you can't put him on the same level as a McQueen or a Ballet. You just can't. Impact-wise, time-wise, you can't. Or like Margiela, you can't put Kane and me on the same level with Margiela. How many designers has Margiela influenced? You just can't do that objectively. So that, like I said, when I do the video, a lot of people will be in their feelings. I feel like a lot of people take it personally. There might be a lot of people that will be like, I'm unsubscribing. How dare you put my favorite designer on on the bottom tier? And I'll just have to deal with that. Wait, who did I mention that's not on there, by the way? Sorry, I was riffing off. Who did I mention? This is already this is actually true, because then I could make an updated tier list of new age designers where it's a bit more fair. It's a bit more fair. You says they'll need to get a life. Oh my god. Are you victim blaming? Is Water on there? Let me have a look. That's actually a good question. Is Walter van Beirendonk on there? I don't think so. There are a few of the Antwerp designers, but once again, like we said, not everyone can be there. Otherwise, I'll literally be sat here for 12 hours doing a tier list. But Andrew Lemeister is there. I think Martin Margiela is there. Raf Simons is there. Who else? What are the Belgian designers? Dries van Noten is there. I can see Dries. Yeah, there's a few. Haider Ackerman is not necessarily a Belgian designer, but I bunch him in with the Belgian designers because he went to Antwerp. So even though he's Colombian, to me, it's just like, yeah, Belgian designer. I kind of lump him in with the Glenn Martins, Demna sort of stuff. Even though like Haider, Demna, none of them are Belgian. Rachel says, everyone will understand it's for fun and ultimately a subjective exercise. I love that you think that way, but not everyone thinks that way, because I see my comments every day and people take things personally online, genuinely. Like every day I see people taking stuff really personally. And in my mind, I'm thinking, that's not what I meant, but I'm not going to police the way you think and police the way that you comprehend things, I guess. Luke says, you'll surprise yourself with how much you can say on each designer. It will stretch your abilities. I think that, to be fair, is the most fun. That will be the most fun aspect, talking about the history of so many different designers and why I think A designer deserves to be on a higher tier than B designer. And this is why it'll be so much fun doing a stream of that, because then other people will then be chiming in. People will be disagreeing with me saying, well, no, I don't agree because this designer did this. That's the fun in it. It's almost like a let's learn about fashion history exercise in a way. Let's just put Rick in the S tier to be safe. So see what I'm saying? If is Madeleine Vionnet in this tier list, if Madeleine Vionnet is in this tier list, automatically Rick can't be in the same. So if I put, that's why I might even have to be reshuffling the tier list as I go. If I put Madeleine Vionnet in the S tier, Rick by default then goes to A or B by default, because that's where a lot of his ideas come from, and that influenced his understanding of the way he designs now and even his silhouettes. So it's so subjective, but it just depends. Yeah, Luke says you need loads more tiers. 100%. The online fashion community is well known. They're considered and well measured responses and opinions. Said opium boys are gonna crash out on me. That's crazy. How dare you not have Rick Owens on the S tier? I would guess that a lot of opium boys don't even know who Madeleine Vionnet is. So I will take the heat because I didn't put Rick Owens. But this is what I said. Like, a lot of people just think if I don't put their favorite designer on the S tier, they're just going to get angry and probably just say you don't know what you're talking about. But I've even told you that Antonella Meister is my favorite designer, but there's no way she's going to be on the S tier. No way. She might not even make the second one, the A tier, because if I'm just being objective, does Antonella Meister have a bigger impact on fashion? Let's do it this way. Does Antonella Meister have a bigger impact on fashion? Let's start going through the names. Then Marta Margiela, no. Then Alexander McQueen, no. Then Christopher Balenciaga, no. Then Madeleine Vionnet, no. Then, and when you start going through the names, you start to understand why she can't be in that tier, even though to me, she's my favorite designer. But I think a lot of people aren't able to be that objective about things that they love. They can't love a designer, but also understand that another designer has more impact. Because that happens all the time when I make videos and I read the comments. People can't put themselves out of it, put their personal aesthetic and their personal taste out of the conversation, just be objective. This opium boy loves Miss Vionnet. Of course I love Madeleine Vionnet. She's so important, fashion history-wise. Very, very important. We need subjective eye. You don't want me to be objective. Did Luke say Martin's legacy is low-key not as huge as he's rated? I think it depends how you see it. For me, I see it more as like, how many designers does Martin inspire? A lot. The amount of designers that their brand is literally just a Margiela ripoff. And then other designers that started that, like Demna kind of started that way. Obviously, Demna has his own aesthetic, but he still does things. I'm like, Jesus Christ, that literally, Margiela did the exact same thing so-and-so season. There are also other brands like Hodakova. Hodakova is a brand that to me, I just think you might as well just work at Margiela. I'm a fan of Hodakova, by the way, but you might as well just work at Margiela at that point. So when I just think of like the realm of fashion, how many people he inspires, that's why I put him that high. But yeah, I'd put Margiela in the S tier for sure. He said Martin's work just won the LVMH prize. Damn. Okay, let me not do that. Let me not do that. You could alter the tier names into legendary, iconoclast instead of S and A plus tiers. That's also a good way to do it, because I think if I do it that way, people will be less offended with the way that I talk about their favorite fashion designers, if that makes sense. So yeah. Let me see. Studio Mella's commented this a few times. Sorry if I missed your comment earlier. I was accepted in management fashion program in mode art school in Paris, but I didn't want to go. I want to be a creative director, not fashion designer. Is there any possible way to get it without any education? If I'm going to be really honest with you, if you want to be a good creative director, you kind of have to be a good fashion designer first, because if you don't, this is my personal opinion, if you don't know much about clothing, design of clothing, how clothes are made, what's possible, a good understanding of different ways of construction, as a creative director, you just can't really be a good creative director for a fashion brand because you just don't really know much about clothes inherently. Now, you can learn without going to fashion school, but I think that if you want to be a creative director, especially a fashion design, like own a fashion brand creative director or work for a fashion brand creative director, you would benefit from just learning about clothes from a fashion design perspective. So I don't think you should neglect it. You don't have to go to school to do it, but you shouldn't neglect it. I would definitely suggest doing an internship with a tailor or at a fashion brand where you're just learning about construction of clothes. I don't I wouldn't ever suggest to anyone to be just a creative director for creative director's sake and not work in fashion or learn in any sense. Um, Even people think Virgil Abloh just didn't know anything about fashion before he went. Not really. Like Virgil Abloh was working with Kanye West. He had proximity to a lot of luxury brands. He also did some stuff with Fendi, like interned at Fendi before. I don't think anyone just like wakes up one day and really makes it to like extreme heights by just waking up from their bed, not understanding anything about clothing and just becoming a creative director. I don't think it happens that way. Wait, Luke says I changed the names. Okay, I need to see. Maybe you have an updated tier list. Do I have an outdated link? I might have an outdated link. That might be why. My link might be outdated. But yeah, shout out to Luke though. Everyone, say thank you to Luke for making the tier list, because I'm definitely going to do it and it's going to be an interesting video. And we have Luke to thank. Oh, Luke says I created one for myself, a ranking. Oh, that's interesting. That's really, really interesting. We showed Fendi leather pants and they said no. Same pictures, just change the tier names to be messy. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, excited for that one. Yeah, I feel like when I do it, normally I schedule streams on the day of on YouTube, or I schedule streams the day before. I think with the tier list, I might have to schedule it a few days before just so that people, and I might have to do it on a weekend so people can actually tune in, because that will be very fun. It'll be very fun. But it might not be anytime soon because, like I said, I need to be in the right mind frame because I know people are going to be angry at me on that day. People are not going to be very happy at all. Luke says I should have put Pharrell in it. That is very flagrant. That is very mean of you, because you know Pharrell is not like, and I'm a fan of Pharrell, but just being objective, that Pharrell is no way going to be put over a lot of the names in this list. So you're just going to revert to putting him at the bottom. It says it might not be anytime soon. It'll come in 2028. I'm not that bad. I'm trying to be more consistent, guys. Don't you think I've been more consistent? Slightly more consistent. on YouTube. And I try to cut down the streams for people that can't sit down and watch them for hours on end. I try to cut them down. So I try. I try. I try. Luke just wants Aya to join him in the Elite Haters Club. Schedule it for right after having your braces tightened. The tooth pain will distract the emotional pain of people coming. First of all, if I stream that when I have my braces tightened, I won't be able to speak properly. That will probably be a terrible stream. I'll be like, so I just wondering the coin, and people be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? What is he saying? What is this guy saying? Anyway, let me quickly go to Instagram and see some of the comments on Instagram, because I neglected Instagram a bit. Let me see what questions people have on there. So someone asked me, how selective are you about the interviews you do? So I guess that would be interviews with people, like on YouTube. Like I've done a few interviews, like with Kat Debo. I've done an interview with Walter van Benendonk on my channel. I've done a few. However, I don't think I'm selective at all. I think that most designers, I would be interested to interview them. The only problem is that the major problem is that most designers know who I am, because when it's Paris Fashion Week or Milan Fashion Week, I see them and I talk to them and they tell me, oh, I really like what you do. I read your articles sometimes. Sometimes when I'm free, I watch your videos, whatever. Or there are designers that tell me in the background, they put my videos on in the studio. So I know that they know who I am. But the problem is, I'm not friends with these designers. We're just cordial. We're like work colleagues. Yeah. And so because of that, I don't have their numbers. I can't really reach out to them. And the only way I can reach out to them is through their PR. And fashion PR, they are some of the worst human beings in the world. I feel like most fashion PR, this is obviously like a big generalization, but I'm just doing it I'm editorializing, guys. I genuinely get the vibe that most people in fashion PR are people that were bullied in school. And so now that they have a semblance of power, they just abuse it like crazy. I've never met worse people in the fashion industry than fashion PR. And fashion PRs do things that are in the worst interest of the brand just because of their ego. I've had situations where I want to interview, this is like when I'm working at BOF or anywhere really, when I've written stuff for other magazines, GQ, whatever. I'll reach out to the PR of a brand and they respond like, oh, so-and-so designer is like really busy, but they send their regards. And then the designer, I don't know what happens behind the scenes. I'm not at the brand, but maybe the designer gets wind of the fact that I reached out for an interview. Then a day later, they might send me an email like, oh my God, I just saw your email. I'd love to do the interview. So what happened between that time when that PR told me that, oh, the person is busy, they send their regards, when they probably didn't even speak to the designer in the first place. And then when the designer somehow, some way, it came to their attention that I was the person that was trying to speak to them. And maybe because some of these designers, they've watched my content or whatever. So they're like, why would the PR say? But it's not just a me problem. Like PR just like this with everyone. I think it's just the worst, honestly, the worst human beings in fashion work in PR. Things that the designers themselves wouldn't do, the PRs do. But because the reason for the PRs being there is because the designers are there to design. The designers aren't supposed to be dealing with those kind of things, liaising with people on like interviews and stuff, because that takes away from their design. So they can't do everything, especially at major houses, the Balenciagas, the Gucci's, stuff like that. That's why they have PR teams. But the PR team, I cannot state to you guys how bad fashion PR is. So that's why I don't do a lot of fashion interviews. I just don't even bother reaching out to people because I know the fashion PRs are going to piss me the fuck off. So I'm just like, you know what? It would be really great if I interviewed so and so designer, so many people would watch it, it would get so many views. Let me see how many views my Walter van Beirendonck interview has. And Walter van Beirendonck is a very niche designer, by the way. He's not like a mainstream designer, but people that love fashion, we all respect Walter van Beirendonck. He's a legend in fashion, one of the top 6. My interview with Walter van Beirendonck has 67,000 views on YouTube, and that's a niche designer. Can you imagine if I interviewed a designer that isn't niche? Because the way I would interview them, I'm going to ask questions while we uncover things. But hey, I don't want to deal with fashion PR. I just can't do it. I've done it enough. I don't want to deal with any more fashion PR. I'm tired of it. So that's why you don't see a lot of interviews on the channel, and that's answering the question on Instagram. That's why I can't really be selective with interviews I do, because I've stopped reaching out to designers or brands because the fashion PRs will frustrate you. So yeah, that's why. Going over a non-decision makers had a standard procedure in all business. Sometimes, but my thing is, if I was in PR, I'm thinking of it from my perspective. If I was in PR, I would do things that are in the best interest of the brand. So if I was a fashion PR and I wanted to have an interview done on YouTube, if I want the most eyeballs, I would go to maybe like the New York Times or maybe Vogue even. If I want an audience of people that really care, like people that actually care about fashion, like not as fickle as like maybe a Vogue audience or New York Times, because New York Times people care more about business, but they might look at a Tom Ford interview because Tom Ford is a big enough designer where people will be interested and he's successful business wise. But if you want any sort of niche designer or people that care, the only people that can really interview those kind of designers are people like Bliss Foster or me or Understitch or like Tuba, Avalon. There's not many people that can do that kind of interview, and that will get views. So if you want to get views and you're looking at that, there aren't that many options. But the typical fashion PR just wouldn't do the interview because their ego. But if I was a fashion PR, I would do what's in the best interest of the brand, which would be to do the interview with these people that have an audience of people that actually care about fashion with a capital F and would actually do numbers also. But once again, fashion PRs, like I've told you guys, as someone that, works in the fashion industry, fashion PRs, the worst human beings on this planet, honestly. If you work in fashion PR, I apologize. I'm not talking about you, but maybe I am. Let's go through the other Instagram questions. Okay, so more people asking me about Glenn Martins at Margiela. Someone says, any opinions on the rumors of Glenn Martins going to Margiela? Obviously, it makes sense because OTB Group owns Margiela and they also own Diesel, which is where he is now. Because even though he's not still at Y Project, he's still at Diesel, is my understanding. So it would be a seamless transition into Margiela. So it makes sense why it's the first option and the thing that, people say. But let's just wait and see, to be honest. And it's down to him. Does he want to do 2 brands for a really long time? Maybe he wants a break just to do Diesel and just chill out a bit and then maybe go to another brand after a while. Maybe he might start his own label. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Let's see. Some of these Instagram questions are not even questions. They're statements. Someone says, what is the future of fashion going to look like with the rise of tech, and how will jobs change? That's a really good question. I think everyone is talking about AI taking a lot of people's jobs. I just don't think AI right now is creative enough to really take anyone's job yet. It might get to that point, and that might be the future. But for now, I think that creativity comes from human individuals. And it might actually mean that, if AI takes over a lot of these things, there will be more allure for things that are made by humans because it's so rare. So when something's made by a human, it'll come with a premium, something like that. But I think, if anything, the future of fashion is going to be slightly more sustainable, slightly, because it's more of a conversation. I don't think majority of these brands care. Sustainability is a buzz term to them that they invest in because that's the expectation of consumers, not because they actually give a fuck. But the industry, I think, will be slightly more sustainable with time, which is hopefully something I want to see happen in the industry. I also think that in the future, if luxury brands aren't careful, a lot of them will disappear, because the way quality is waning with a lot of these luxury brands is insane. That they are increasing the prices of their products and simultaneously reducing the quality. Like I said earlier, the hardware used to be 24 karat gold, now it's gold toned brass. All these kind of like minute things that they're doing to cut costs but still increase the prices. I think that whole thing is going to implode on itself very soon. Leah says, I think tech will be far more functional and useful in improvements in fabrics, textiles, and production processes. Some brands are using it in advertising campaigns, so it's a mixed bag. Yeah, that's a good point. That's definitely, people just want me to say silver tone brass. That's why I kept saying gold tone brass. Silver tone brass. That's some urban law right there. But yeah, anyway, I've now been speaking for 2.5 hours, so this stream shall now come to an end. But thank you very much for everyone that tuned in. I'm trying my best. I'm going to try my hand at becoming a daily fashion streamer, like the Kaisen app for fashion. So we'll see how many days I can do that for. I might miss some days, maybe. But thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to learn about fashion, like how to learn about fashion more effectively, I have an ebook titled How to Learn About Fashion More Effectively. You can find that in the link in the description below. And on that note, I shall be seeing you guys very soon, hopefully tomorrow. But don't hold me to that.